Thinking Tackle, sponsored by Dower Infinity.
Well, welcome to the first in a new series of Thinking Tackle, and right on cue, the Carp have started to play the game. We're at Farriers Lake, which is in the Cotswold Water Park, somewhere near Swindon, and it's another water run by the Carp Society. They've got a very famous horseshoe lake, and this is another one of their syndicate waters. Never been here before. This is my first bite from a new lake. Oh, the lion just tipped over his dorsal. And we are here in search of the enormous commons that swim in this lake. And that's why my knees are trembling at the moment, because it feels like a reasonable fish. The water is very, very shallow. Where I'm fishing is only about 4 feet deep. And there's lots of weed around. So I'm trying to keep as tight a line as I dare on the fish. Oh, tipped over his dorsal again there as he's rolling on the line. It's really kiting round. I can feel the weed actually. Oh, and again. This is one of those fights where you think I'm never going to get it in. It's going so mad in this shallow water. There's commons in this lake to over 40 pounds, and they're stunning, stunning carp. The Carp Society stocked it back in the 90s. About 10 years ago with 650 fish. Guessing the lake's about 25 to 30 acres, something like that. I shouldn't really be talking to you. I should be concentrating on what I'm doing because it's found a bit of weed there. I've got a guest with me as well. I've got Nick Hellier. And Nick has chosen to fish the other side of the bay. He got here just a bit before me yesterday. I was very lucky. One of the bailiffs was fishing in this swim, and he's had to rush home on family business. So I've jumped in here, and a couple of local guys that I know have put me onto a decent spot, which we're obviously going to talk about in a little while. Oh, it's weeded me up. Come on. That's it, it's moving again now. This is real heart in the mouth stuff here. Just got to keep him moving now because he's, it's quite a heavy fish, quite a powerful fish. And he just had his head in some Canadian pondweed there, which is all over the lake bed around here. But he is getting a bit closer now. If I can just keep this tight line on him. It's barbless hooks as well. There he is on the surface, so it's important to keep a tight line. And during the show, myself and Nick are obviously going to talk to you about how we approach these sort of waters. To be honest with you, if I got one fish for the cameras, I was going to be over the moon, because it is a new lake. It's not an easy lake, even though there's a lot of fish in here. It's quite pressured, and pretty much typical where a lot of people have got to fish nowadays, these kinds of waters. Right, I'm going to have to go down and get my feet a little bit wet, because he wants to go around the corner. Come on, fish. There we go. Let's turn him. Try and keep him over the top of that other line. One of the many, many commons that are in here. Apparently if we catch a mirror we're going to be very lucky. Oh, he's a lovely carp. Come on, get in the net. Got him! Come on! Pucker, well pleased with that, well pleased. That is a brilliant start to the series. Couldn't have written that one out in advance. Look at that. What a stunner. Oh, all right, mate, all right. Chill out. That's what we came for, mate, isn't it, eh?
Yeah, perler.
Stunning common carp. And we said one of these and we'd be happy, wouldn't we, between the two of us?
Yeah.
From a lake you'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to bait in a little while, have a look at that all-important spod mix and the special hook baits that I'm using as well. Nick's more of a roving angler, a bit of an opportunist where I like to sit it out over bait, but I reckon you may be roving in next door, mightn't you, in a little while?
I might well do that.
We'll get this fella back and then we'll get on to bait.
Sweet. Pucker.
I've chosen this particular swim because it's on a big peninsula that juts out into the lake and I can intercept fish if they're coming left or right in front of me, and that suits my style of fishing. So when I got here yesterday afternoon, I put the marker float out. Fortunately a couple of guys came down that put us onto this lake, showed me a perfect spot to fish to, and lo and behold I've had a bite off it today. Now this is the mix, or the munger as we call it. Look at that. That is so carpy, loads of different bits in there. So I've started off with party mix, which has got like an aniseed smell to it. That's got all little bits of maize and little maples and stuff in it. To that I've added another tub of chili hemp, my old favourite chili hemp. Carp love spicy things. I've added 2 tins of tuna, this time in sunflower oil. That gives a nice slick up off the bait. So when it's sunny and the water's warmer, you can get a slick coming up off the bait. That's going to attract the fish in. And being in one of these open water areas, that's giving me an advantage as well. And then to that I've added some salt to enhance the flavour and also some chilli powder just to spice it up even more. And then the last ingredient, you can see all the white bits in there, that's cell boilie. And you can see I've crushed all that up. I've actually done it at home in a blender to start off with, but we've got a little tool to do that when you're in session. Now let's just clean my hands off a little bit and show you the bait, because this is really important to do with the boilies. That's the bag they come in. They come in the freezer at your local tackle shop, so they're going to go off. If you don't dry these baits out during a session, they'll sweat inside that bag and they'll go off, and the manufacturers actually say take them out of the bag once they've defrosted. And I'm just going to transfer them into that air dry bag, and during my session I'll hang them up on a tree if it's nice and dry and just let the air get to them, keep moving them around during the session and they won't go off. And then the next ones I've brought with me are the same bait, the cell, but in 10mm size. Now these are absolutely like gold dust. I even have to beg and plead to get hold of these myself. Let's open that bag up so you can see the ones I've got drying out. I'll open that up and pour those in. Now the reason I've got 10mm is I didn't know what the lake was going to be like, and I may have had to fish in a little tiny corner and just catapult the boilies out. Now the smaller the boilie, the less splash it makes, and if there's fish in that corner already, I don't want to scare them away. So those 10mm are absolutely perfect for that job. And to be honest with you, they're too good to put in the spod mix. I'd rather crush them up at 14mm and put them in, and I'll just keep them. If I don't use them this session because I am now spodding, I'll just dry them out, put them back in the freezer, and as long as you only refreeze them once, they'll be perfect for the next time you fish. So let's show you the all important crusher tool. So I've run out of my blended up bait that I did at home, and what I'm going to do now is crush up some more cell boilies. Just chuck a handful in there. There's one side that says fill, obviously that's the one you drop the boilies into. Just press down, just twist backwards and forwards a few times, and that's what you end up with, crushed up baits. Obviously I've got a lot of boilies in there already, so I'm not going to do too many, but just to show you that again, just a handful of boilies in there. There's two sizes. This bigger one is better for bigger baits, and the smaller one's better for tiger nuts and that sort of thing. Push the top on and just give it a few twists like that, and that's it done. Now for amounts of bait, I've started off with about a dozen spodfuls over 2 rods, and believe it or not, just before I got the bite I was going to put some more bait out because I had a funny take earlier on this morning. Don't know if it was a carp or not, but I just felt there were fish showing in the area, but I hadn't got any more bites, and sometimes just putting a couple of spodfuls in can get you a bite when the swim's gone dead. Just as I was about to do that, I got the bite. So after recasting both the rods, I put 4 or 5 spodfuls back out again just to draw the fish back into the area and hopefully get another bite later on this afternoon. So that's the bait that I'm using. Let's have a look at my special hook baits.
Thinking Tackle, sponsored by Dower Infinity.
Hook bait choice on these type of venues is absolutely critical, and these fish have been fished for probably about the last 10 years heavily. To start off with, you could put anything on the end and get a bite. That's changed. As the fish have got bigger, believe it or not, the hook baits have got smaller. So let's talk you through the selection I've got for this particular session. First of all, these fellas, these are made specially for me. It's a lovely pungent pineapple coming off of those, probably like a 10mm sort of barrel shape, different from a round one, and I think a little bit more readily taken. And if we just show you this one on the end of the rig there, that's a slow sinker, so there's a little bit of pop-up mix with a normal boilie mix and that pineapple flavour, and it's literally just going to sit like that on the bottom, so the bait is just hovering above. And over the top of a spod mix, a little bright hook bait like that can often be picked out first. The next one down, we've got a bit of floating pop-up corn there, and then we've also got a 10mm cell boilie, and again that's going to sit, literally the weight of that boilie is just going to allow it to just hover like that, so it goes into the fish's mouth very easily. We've got 2 different types of attraction. We've got the cell bait that I'm obviously feeding, and again a pineapple flavoured bit of pop-up corn. Both of those effectively are bottom baits, and that's another thing on this type of venue. I reckon loads of people fish with pop-up, so if I can fish a bottom bait I will do. Unfortunately, out in front of me there's a lovely patch. I'm not fishing on the gravel. I've avoided that at all costs because it's so obvious everyone's going to fish on that, so I've gone just beyond it where there's just a shallow bit of weed, probably only a few inches deep. The lead's still feeling down nice and hard. I've got a PVA stick on as well to stop the hook getting caught in anything in the bottom, and I'll fish those over the top of that sort of spod mix if I possibly can. Now the next 2 are pop-ups, so if I go to that first one, it's a pop-up that I've whittled down a little bit to make it smaller. I've got a little bit of putty underneath that size 6 wide gate B, and that's how it's going to sit, very, very close to the bottom. The hook link itself is a bit longer, probably 8 or 9 inches, something like that, because I'm going to fish that over weed that's a little bit higher off the bottom. So that's the rig I would use for that situation. And that next hook bait down, if I can just show you that one, that's one of my homemade specials. This is actually the Grange mix, but it's exactly the same colour as the cell. Perfect for fishing over the top of it, and I've just made those with the Polaris pop-up mix, and I've literally just squeezed them like that into an odd shape so they look like the chops in my own spod mix. So that's going to be very hard to differentiate from the fish's point of view between a free offering and one of those. And again, that's going to sit very, very low to the bottom, so it's not too startling for the fish, and I'd fish that over a little bit of bottom weed. And then the last one, if it's a little bit clearer, This is the KD rig, so I've changed the pattern of hook from a wide gate B to a curve B, that's a size 8. Slightly longer hair, and can you see there, I've got the hair coming off the back of the knotless knot. All the others have got a ring attached to the hook so that the hair comes off the hook a little bit further down. This one works completely differently. You're making the eye of the hook light, which in turn makes the point of the hook heavy. And that's when that goes in, that's going to catch hold really aggressively and hopefully get us lots of bites. That one I wouldn't fish if there's heavy weed, because you can see as you're pulling that up off the bottom, the hook's sort of hanging down and it can get caught in the weed. So if it's weedy, just to show you that one before, I've got it that way round, so the hook goes into their mouth a little bit easier. If it's not so weedy, back onto the KD rig, and even if that hook's coming up that way, it's not going to get caught in any weed. And one little tip, let's go on to these very, very bright hook baits. These ones here are Frutella, absolutely delicious hook baits. Very, very bright, pink's a great colour. These are the smallest ones you can get, the 10 millers, but with these I would even still cut them down even more, and with a size 8 hook, a pop up like this cut down to this amount is going to end up a slow sinking hook bait. And fishing a little tiny sort of barrel shape like that over the top of a spod mix is going to get you loads of bites. So my tip for fishing pressured waters, if there's not loads of nuisance fish, use tiny hook baits. Well, it's the second morning, nothing happened last night. I'm just having to recast the rod because you can see them out there now. The tufties are diving all over the bait, which means there's bait there. It is actually a good indicator of whether they've been fishing feeding or not. That rod just got picked up by a tufty, so it's obviously presented correctly. If they can see it, the fish can see it. So I'm going to buzz it back out again. Nick has moved. He's done 2 nights over there and not had anything, so he's moved up the lake. So when we get hold of him later on, we're going to talk stick mixes with him. But I'm just going to get this one back out again, hopefully scare the tufties away at the same time, because we're getting towards bite time now. So I really want to get this right first time. Perfect, absolutely bang on the money. Just felt that down. I'm just fishing on a little tiny bit of weed on the bottom. When I wind in, there's a little bit of weed around the hook, so it's disguising everything on the bottom for me. I'm avoiding the really clear patches, and my bite yesterday came at about 12 o'clock. It's now 10 o'clock in the morning, so hopefully if I don't get any more problems from the ducks, we may get another chance this sort of lunchtime.
Thinking Tackle, sponsored by Dower Infinity.
We're going to talk stick mixes now with the inventor of the stick mix, Nick the Stick, as they call him, behind his back. So first of all, mate, tell us why you thought of doing a stick.
Really, it was I was fishing some lakes up in Oxfordshire a few years back, and all the fish were held up very high in the water, over deep water. It was in the winter, and basically trying to work out a way to get those fish to drop to the bottom.
Get them to
to get them down. You know, I used little pop-ups and tried to spot stuff and flutter maggots through them to drop them down. All these things nothing worked.
Right.
And sat and thought about it like you do, and I thought, well, the only thing I can conceivably come up with was oil would rise from the bottom to the top.
Yep.
Which in practice in cold water is very difficult. It congeals like a lump of fat, and it was very difficult to get it to do what I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if people, I find if you put oil in the fridge, that's how you see what. If you put olive oil in the fridge, that's what it goes like. That's what a fish oil goes like on the bottom of the lake in its raw form.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So to get around that, I started messing around with ground baits, mixing them into ground baits, fine ground baits, mixing the oils into ground bait, and I found that even in the colder water, little bags of basically this oily ground bait once I'd left it to soak into the ground bait for a while, it would actually release it very fine, little fine droplets, but constant over
Right.
several hours, like, you know, and that proved to be the key. That was the turning point.
Right, right, okay. So show us the mix that you've made up in advance there.
Yeah.
First of all, that's your. Let everybody see that. That is your mix. So have a squeeze and just describe to us the consistency that
Yeah.
you're looking for.
Consistency is everything.
Right.
You know, consistency is everything. It needs to be a good stick mix. Should be able to hold together like that, and then you've only got to touch it and it crumbles down, almost a cakey texture.
Yeah.
That's perfect. But to get it like that, you can't just make that up on the bank. You
Right,
know,
okay.
to get my mixes exactly how I want them, I make them up at home, probably 2 days before I go fishing, in a food processor, an old food processor that I got
Yeah.
from Jumble Sale years and years
Not
ago.
Rachel's one.
No, thank God, no, she wouldn't be. But funny enough, it's still going. I've had it years and years, and it stood me in good stead. I make all my mixes at home, and when I make them, what you find happens is you'll make them, and I'm adding lots of oil, lots of liquid, and natural attractors. And the finished mix actually looks like wet builder's sand, unusable. You'd look at it and think, well, that's just rubbish, you know.
Right.
So
Doesn't hold together.
Oh
or
no,
anything,
no!
it's
It just looks ridiculous, like wet,
Oily
sloppy,
dust.
like just awful.
Yeah.
But if you screw him up in a carrier bag and leave him, I put him on the shelf in the shed, leave
Yeah.
him for 24 hours, go back to him, he's like that.
Right.
All all those fish oils, all the natural bits and bobs you got in there are soaked into all the ground bait particles, and you're left with this. Absolutely beautiful.
Right.
That is pretty much the perfect stick mix. Look at that.
Right. So
Absolutely
just give us the
fantastic.
basic ingredients then. Mix one up in there for us so we can see, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So a complete beginner can put
A
it
complete.
together.
Well, I mean, there's obviously lots of ways you can make a stick mix. Basically, my favourites all work around a fish meal theme.
Right.
I use a nice fish meal ground bait. This is a marine halibut ground bait.
Right.
That's my base. That's the main ingredient. So this is obviously a scaled down version, just to make do in front of the camera. But that's the main part. So if you imagine you're working in parts like you'd make a loaf of bread or whatever, that's going to be like the main constituent. 2/3 of the mix is going to be made.
Right.
of that.
Okay.
That's a basic fish meal ground bait.
Right.
Next is another one. This is actually made as a method mix, but it contains quite high levels of krill, which is something that I really like. It's a really attractive ingredient.
Right.
Something that Carp absolutely love.
Okay.
Always have some of that in there.
Right.
And then dependent on the clarity of the water, like for instance we're fishing here now it's very clear. And if it was very bright and you're fishing for big carp that are being fished for, they can be quite scared of obvious things.
Right. Okay.
So basically this is very little more than a dye, really.
Right, okay.
I'll add that in various
That's a
amounts.
Mino black ground
That's
bait.
a Mino black ground bait.
Right. Okay.
Basically, just to try and, if I was fishing a sort of more coloured water where it was hungry and I actually want a visual aspect, I wouldn't put any colour in it, because when
Right.
the stick mix breaks down, it becomes quite blatant.
Yes.
And even a small stick, once it's fully fluffed out, broken down over a couple of hours, can be like quite an obvious thing from quite a distance. But anyway, in these clearer waters, I'd like to add a bit of black.
Right. Okay.
So basically, give them a thorough mix in,
Yeah.
and then add your liquids.
Right.
You can make this as complicated or as easy as you like. It doesn't need to be complicated at all.
Right, okay.
I've got 3 basic ingredients, and then oil. Oil is a key to my stick mixes.
Right. And what oil is that?
That is a liquid halibut pellet.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's got added betaine in it and that.
Right.
You can use any fish oil. Depending on the time of year, I like to use different oils, I'll be honest. But essentially, once the water's nice and warm, a fish oil is a fish oil.
So springtime onwards.
Yeah,
effectively.
springtime onwards.
Right,
From
okay.
now onwards, like.
Right.
And you can
You can
see.
hear how sandy it is.
Oh yeah,
in the,
yeah,
in
yeah.
The thing,
You can
can't
see
you?
almost it looks unusable now.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd be amazed. I mean, at home I make up probably a kilo at a time. And rather than working small amounts like this, I work on the bags of ground bait. I work on a bag of ground bait to a bag of ground bait. So I'm
Right.
making about a kilo at a time. And you'd be astonished. I can get like 500 ml of oil into that,
Right.
and it looks totally unusable, just like that.
Right.
It looks ridiculous. You pick it up, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unusable.
Right.
But even now, I mean, that's not got an awful lot of oil in. There's probably only 20 ml of oil in that.
Right.
In this little tiny amount. Then obviously, once I've done my bits and bobs, my basic, I add my special bits. I'm a really big fan of natural ingredients. It's all about pulling power.
Right.
without artificial additives, you know.
Right, so no flavours and all that sort of thing that people would normally use.
No,
Only
no.
natural stuff.
Natural stuff that you literally can't overdo.
Right.
Stuff like this shrimp paste, which, I mean, you have a smell.
That's minging.
Yeah.
It's very
like
shrimpy though. Very
yeah.
shrimpy.
Oh yeah, very attractive. Very
Right.
high in salt. We've also got something along the same lines, some Belacan,
Yeah.
which is
I've got involved in that before, which is basically toe jam in a block.
yeah. Again, you can't overdo these things. You know,
Right.
they're very strong smelling, but they're a natural product.
Right.
And again, wild salmon,
Right.
full of omega-3, really rich in flavour and taste. And the anchovies, something I've been using a lot lately.
Yeah.
All of these things really enhance a mix, give it incredible smell, incredible pulling power, but without being overpowering.
Right, and they all go in your food processor. They all go in at that point, so they're being mixed
Yeah.
into the powders and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So they're taken down really fine
Yeah.
and spread right the way throughout
That's
the
right,
mix.
yeah.
Right, okay. And liquid-wise, you've got a couple of other things there. What are they?
Yeah, I've got some
Show
fresh
everybody
prawn.
that so they can see.
Yeah, some fresh prawn, some shellfish. Basically, it's a very
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
That is proper prawny, that. Isn't
Yeah, beautiful. Another beautiful. Again, natural. You can't overdo it. You know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm big on natural products. That's it, really, in a nutshell. Some green lip mussel powder here, which I also use. Everybody knows it's a great ingredient.
And how much of that goes in there?
Well, I get it off the bait company, so I don't have to pay for it, but which is good because you know this stuff can be upwards of like £100 a kilo.
Right. Okay.
You know, it's very expensive, but you
Right.
don't need a lot. It's very salty. I'm using quite salty ingredients anyway.
Right.
I use a couple of tablespoons.
Right. Okay. So how big a stick? Let's move back onto the one you've got done. That's been done a couple of days. How big a stick would you tie with that? Let's have a look at that stuff there. How big a stick would you tie with that then?
It all depends on the bottom I'm fishing over.
Right.
And it all again, it's all dependent on the situation.
Right.
Have you got a funnel web there? I'll make
Yeah,
one.
go on.
But I mean, usually
What do you want? A boilie or
a boilie. Yeah,
Yep.
boilie's my animal of choice.
I remember when you first showed us this, and you had the bit of wood. Do you remember
Yeah.
the bit of wooden dowel that
Yeah,
was pushing it out the
Yeah.
tube? We were all amazed, weren't we? We were at the NEC show at Birmingham, and couldn't believe it how much oil was coming off of it.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah, the early mixes were incredibly oily. Well, they still are. I still use a lot of oil.
Yeah.
I don't think you can use too much as long as you get your mix right and leave it to stand properly. There's no reason why you cut. You know, the sky's the limit really.
Right. So how long does that take to go off?
It's got anchovy in it. It's got shrimp paste. This will be all right for a couple of weeks. As long as it's not in direct sunlight, obviously.
Right, okay.
But
So-
when I get home from fishing, I'll put that in a carrier bag, sort of seal it up tight and just put it on the shelf in the shed or leave it in the tackle box. But yeah, you'll be amazed.
Right.
If I'm using the fresh salmon or sardines or the like, they will tend to go off quicker.
Right.
But a lot of these ingredients, like the anchovies, they're salted anyway. They don't.
Which is a natural preservative.
Yeah, they just
basically.
won't go off.
Right.
So yeah, there's no problem with that.
Right.
This mix will keep for ages.
Right, and you can see that soaking in there, and that's your hook bait.
Yeah.
With it.
Yeah.
Now, what is that, and why is it that shape and size?
Well, really, it's just a case of obviously I watch the fish a lot in the water, and when you actually see them come into a swim and pick up a stick, often they'll drop straight onto it, and you see the gills flare and all loads of particles and debris going through the gills where they really want it.
Yeah.
And you've got to be very careful with your hook bait. Quite often I've seen them right themselves up and swim off. And that's happened a lot of time when I've been using, back in the day when I used to use bigger baits.
What, so they've not got the hook bait in their mouth?
Well, they've had the hook bait in their mouth, and the hook bait's just been spat out again because they're sifting the fine ingredients.
Right.
That's
So
what
the
it's all
smaller
about.
the hook bait, the better, effectively,
Yeah.
if you're fishing with that sort of fine mix like that.
Yeah, I find I'm happier with a smaller hook bait, definitely.
Right, okay, so show everybody that from there. So that's pulled right up inside it.
Yeah.
So there's no way that anything can tangle on the cast.
No.
And that's about the size you'd use.
Yeah.
And how often would you recast that?
Again, it's dependent on the situation. If I'm fishing for bigger fish on hard, I'm very aware that constant recasting can cost you fish rather than gain you them.
Yep.
I think people need to be aware of that.
So on pressured waters, you don't recast so much?
I don't need to. That is giving off attraction, I know that that is giving off lots of attraction for several hours.
Right.
And then even after that, when all the attraction dies away, a fish only has to swim over the area,
Right.
you know, within a couple of foot of the bottom, and it'll kick up again,
Yeah.
flat off on the surface. You'll see the, you know, often you'll be sat there and all of a sudden you'll see a flat come up and you'll think, oh, like you expect to bite. Well, that's just one that's just swum over it.
Yeah,
not,
right.
not that's feeding on it.
Dispersed all the oil, it's come up to the
And then
top.
half hour later, one comes in on the fresh scent again and drops down and you get a bite.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, if I was fishing a day ticket, well, I'd quite happily recast them because these are power packed, full of attraction. You know, 5 or 6 casts over the course of a day, all you're doing is building your swim up.
Right.
You know, your ground bait in your plot. You haven't got to be casting on the same spot, but by you know, fishing in a general area, you're creating you know, the whole area is full of smell. You know, there's attraction. You just, you know, the longer you fish those spots, the better it gets.
Right.
But,
So that is wildly different. Let's show me your mix there. That is wildly different from what I've got there. I mean, obviously, I've caught loads of fish on sticks
Yeah.
before. That's anchovies because you were raving about them. I've smashed up in the crusher, and then I've just added just some small 2mm and 4mm bloodworm pellets that we used in the underwater filming that were so good, and a bit of the Blitz ground bait, which is very, very oily. Now mine, it does squeeze together, but there's a lot bigger bits in it. Than yours has got there, and it's nowhere near as oily. So it's good to see the contrast between the two, and definitely tonight I'm going to have some of that on and some of that, and we'll fish it against each other.
By all means.
And see how it goes. And then that one I've got done there, that's basically my boilie stick mix, if you like. Ground up boilies in a little tiny crusher, a little bit of the nut sludge, because this is the cell mix, which is a little bit nutty, a little bit coconutty sort of smell. A little bit of the cell liquid to go in it, just the dip, and it will squeeze together, but that breaks up quite quickly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, you know, now you've got the crusher, I think, you know, people can, even if you haven't got stick mix with you, you can make one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All you need is a few boilies, even a little bit of lake water, just a touch, just to get the consistency. You got a stick mix.
Yeah.
You know, even if you haven't bought any with you. So, you know, that's pucker, mate. Yeah.
Excellent.
I like the idea of that.
Excellent. Well, that is sticks in depth. If you haven't used them, definitely get on them. They will get you loads of bites. Fish them over bait, fish them as singles. We're certainly going to plug away with them and hopefully get some more bites.
Thinking Tackle, sponsored by Dower Infinity.
We're taking advantage of the temporary break in the weather in this lovely spring weather to talk about rig safety. Now, Carp Society have got several rules in place that means we can't use certain products that we would like to be using normally, but those rules are there for a very good reason. I've got a couple of examples that have actually been retrieved from fish at the Carp Society's Horseshoe Lake to show you how to do it wrong. So the first one, for all intents and purposes, looks nice and safe. We've got an inline lead there, rubber connector on the back, the swivel pulls out fairly easily. We've got what looks like a fluorocarbon leader, that's going to pass through that, no problem at all, until we get to that fella there. Look at that. Someone has put some kind of link swivel on the end of that leader to make it easy to tie the main line to it. Why they couldn't have just tied the main line to that little loop, let's take the weed away there. You could have tied the main line to that little loop on the end there and the whole lot would have passed through there, absolutely no problem. So it's not the leader that's at fault, it's the person setting it up. So let's show you the right way to do it. This is a safe zone leader. So it's thicker than the fluorocarbon that was on the last rig. Pull the swivel out again. The rig's been wet because obviously you're going to use it when it's wet. The tungsten bits have pulled through there. You've got the little loop on the end. Bang, and off it's come. And so that's completely safe. A safe product, but used incorrectly makes it an unsafe product. And that's why they're not allowed on Carp Society waters. Now, the next one is a lead clip. Everyone knows, you know, so these are even called safety bolt beads by some people. If they're set up correctly, they are completely safe. This particular one, just like the first one, was retrieved from a fish. And the first thing to note is barbless rules on this particular venues. There's a barbed hook on there. So that's the first thing that the person's done wrong, probably deliberately. And then the next thing, if I hold the lead and then pull against this, you can see that is a lot of pressure to get that off of there. The system itself is all set up correctly, but I think what the person's done is they've pushed that rubber on too far, and most importantly, they haven't wet the back. So if I just put a bit of saliva on there, as you're supposed to do every time you start fishing, push it on about halfway, do the same test, and it's come off really easily. So again, nothing wrong with the leader itself, it's just the angler has pushed the rubber on too far and that stopped the lead from coming off. And just to show you the right way of doing it, that's what I've been fishing with in this session. This one's set up for gravel. The water here is extremely clear. So if I'm fishing on gravel, I would have rig tubing like that because I can't use the leaders because of the rules. I've flecked it with a little bit of brown pen to camouflage it as well, and then I've got a brown coated lead. And then the lead clip itself, if I just hold that lead just to show you that there, the lead clip itself is a new design. It's called a hybrid lead clip, and I'll pull this apart and show you why. So pull that, leads come off very, very easily. But if I show you the lead clip itself, this is a prototype, so the swivel's still a bit shiny, but the swivel is actually moulded inside the clip. So there's no way the swivel can pull out the front of the clip, which you might think is really unsafe. But as long as that rubber isn't on too tight at the back, the lead's going to come off if it gets caught in any weed. And just like the fish I was playing at the start of the programme, the lead's come off, the fish has come up in the water. It did weed me up during the fight, but just by putting a bit of extra pressure on it, it's come out the weed and I've landed it. So the golden rule is, if the line breaks, can the fish get rid of the lead? Obviously the two good examples here, that's happened easily. The two other ones, it hasn't happened at all. So it's your responsibility to get it absolutely right. Exactly tropical at the moment, is it, mate?
No, mate, very horrible.
It's that time of year though, and it can be glorious, can't it? Or it can be cold, and it's definitely got colder since the weekend. But what surprises me, you're still fishing zigs. Now, why is that? How do you fish them? What materials do you use? All that sort of thing. Because I'm rubbish at it. So
You just always, my style of fishing, you're always trying to make the very best of every opportunity or every situation, you know.
And you're doing short sessions most of the time, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean more so.
A day,
yeah, a day,
half
maybe
a day.
overnight and into the next day. But you know that can be over several different lakes if it's not. You know, my style of fishing is all about seeing the opportunity. For one, identifying the opportunity, but secondly, making the most of any opportunity or any situation.
Right.
And what we've got here, we've got a very shallow lake with a big head of carp. It's been quite busy while we've been here. The weather's been poor. But we've noticed the few carp we have seen, and we've seen a few. There's a lot of carp. You're going to see them.
From one end to the other as well.
Yeah, they get about. We never see them in the same place, so that tells you they're getting about. You know, they're getting about regardless of the weather. You know, they're up and about. They're moving around the lake. But a lot of the bottom of the lake, in the bits I've cast in, are covered in filamentous algae and silkweed. You know,
so very difficult to present a bottom bait in.
Just
basically.
Almost impossible, unless you're in one of the prime swims, one of the known main swims, like you are, where you know.
I knew you were going to put that in as to why I've had a bite.
No, not at all. You know what I mean. But you know, one of the main swims that get fished a lot, the same areas get baited. You notice, like locals have been round to me. Oh yeah, they fish the spot out there. You know, you chuck out a big bald area where everywhere else is weedy as you like.
Right.
Now these carp, of course, it might only be 4 foot deep. 3-4 foot deep across most of the lake, but of course they're getting about and they're not swimming dead tight to the bottom or just under the surface. They drift through the middle in 2 foot, so you've got 2 foot above them, 2 foot below them. Well, a foot of that below them is weed and crud, and all I'm trying to do is get a bait to sit just above that, so it's in their line of sight.
Right.
And you know, you're 2/3 there then, you know, because they're moving about, they're active, they're common carp, which are a different animal, as you know, and all we're trying to do is to pull one's attention.
Right. So hook bait wise, what are you using?
I like dulled down stuff. I mean, I'm using like a mixer coloured boilie, if you like. You know,
So it's a pop-up boilie.
A pop-up boilie, just whittled down, or I use a bit of cork. They're my favourite hook baits.
Right.
I don't, you know, like I've said to you before, we're not trying to feed them. It's not a food orientated thing. People seem to struggle with the, you know, they can't make the
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah,
I'm the
I mean,
same.
you know,
how
you
can
know-
you catch them on a bit of cork
Yeah.
when it smells of nothing,
Yeah,
tastes
yeah.
of nothing?
Yeah, yeah.
How can you catch? But
Yeah.
it obviously works.
Yeah, of course it
And
does.
small is better, I take it.
Yeah, small is much better because it requires investigation. If it's really big, they can basically they can make their mind up before they get to it.
Yeah,
You know,
got it. Yeah.
and that's the big thing. Like you know,
And hook wise, to go with
hook
it.
size 10 wide gate is what I use most of the time. I'm
Right.
using short, double strength, like a pre-stretched hook link.
Like a mono hook link, but pre-stretched, so it's
Yeah,
very thin.
It's very thin for its
Right.
for its breaking strain.
Right.
You know, and of course short lengths of that because it's pre. There's not a lot of stretch in it.
Yep.
So you know, it's not ideal. It's not the ideal way to be fishing for these fish because they are big fish.
They are,
and it's
definitely.
weedy, but you know that says it all. That says you know that should say enough that I am doing that. You know what I mean? Because it is my best
It's
chance.
desperate
of-
measures, basically.
Well, you know, it's not desperate, but you know, I don't really want to be fishing for big carp with a short pre-stretched hook link.
Yeah.
But it is the most likely chance I've got of a bite.
Right,
You know,
and
if
the
I'm honest.
thing I've noticed, very interesting thing, you haven't tied the hook on with a knotless knot as most people do. You've tied it on with a Palomar, and then with a hair, you've sort of done almost like an overhand knot around the shank of the hook.
Yeah, it's like a half hitch on the shank.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Palomar knot is because I use a little wide gate and they've got a kink tie. No knotted, they just break on the knot every time.
Yep.
Obviously,
Too much pressure
yeah,
against
just,
the eye.
and on an acute angle, you know,
Yes,
it just
right.
breaks. So you need the Palomar knot to give the strength. Same as when I'm floater fishing. It's the same hook I use for float. In fact, the very same setup. I'm just fishing it off a lead and a short rather than fishing it on the surface.
Right.
Exactly the same. Even when I'm fishing on the surface, half hitch up the shank. When I'm zigging, it keeps the hook perfect. The
Yep.
hook doesn't get the chance to
To
lay
fall
down.
over,
You
yeah.
know, because even though the pop-up is small, it's buoyant enough to hold up a little bit of line. It's probably buoyant to hold up 8 or 10 foot of line,
Yeah.
but the hook will still pivot on itself.
Right.
And when you actually lay it in the water and watch it, the hook will often lay down. So that half inch, just make sure the hook's prone.
Right.
Just like it is on a pop-up rig. You know,
Right.
you've got the buoyancy of the pop-up rig, keeps that hook prone. When they hit it, the point is in the right position.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same. That's,
Right.
You know, that's what it's for.
All right, well, it looks like it's going to pour down in a minute, so we'll get under the bivvies. I know we've made you fish in this swim for a little while because we were doing some other bits and pieces, but you're free to go back over to your third plot of the session and see if we can snare one before the end.
Yeah, I've seen a few over there. It's been
Yeah.
off the wind.
More than
so-
a few.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I've
the
seen a
pressure's
good
on,
few.
son.
That'd be all right, mate. We'll get a bite.
Well, Nick's perseverance has finally paid off. His third swim in 3 days and he's bagged one. Not a massive fish, but a carp all the same. How big, mate?
It's only a little chap, but he's more than welcome.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, he's a nice little
What a
carp.
stunning carp. Let's lift him up and let's have a look. What's he go, mate? Oh,
17 pound.
nice. And on what rig?
On my little zig rig.
The one we talked about
Yeah,
in the other swim?
Yeah.
Just a little tiny one.
Yep.
Calm down, fella.
Yeah, 10 inch.
And you had another occurrence in the night, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, the take took lots of line, and unfortunately, I think it hit another angler's line on the far bank and cut me off. Which is just one of those things, mate.
Yeah.
You know, when you, like I said yesterday, when you're catching them on such a short, delicate link, if they want to run, you've got to let them. You've got to let them go. You know,
Yeah.
and that's the trade-off. Like you know, you don't always land all of them.
Yeah.
But
Well-
I'm happy with that one. It saved the day. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we ain't done bad with it. That's 3 bites we've had, and there's been 4 bites on the lake in total. We've had 3 of them.
Out of 12 anglers.
Out of 12 anglers.
Yeah.
So we haven't done bad at all.
Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
that's all we've got time for in this edition of Thinking Tackle. Thank you very much to Nick for being our guest. It certainly added another dimension to my fishing. That roving approach at this time of the year can obviously be very effective. And thanks too to the Carp Society for letting us fish at Farriers. If you want any details about the lake, just look online. Thanks very much for watching.
Thinking Tackle, sponsored by Dower Infinity.